The real aha moments in coaching are the ones where people come to the realization themselves. If you were going out for lunch with your mate and he was going or she was going on a date or going for an interview after your lunch, and as you got up you realized that they had spinach on their teeth, what would you say to your friend? Would you say anything or would you just leave it? How can I support you without getting in your way is a great question to ask team members.
I love that. How can I support you without getting in your way?
We often see is that leaders think that they need to have all the answers, possibly because that's what's got them to where they are. Jack Welch from General Electric famously said, before you're a leader, success is about growing yourself, but when you become a leader, success is about growing others.
What does beautiful business mean to you?
Welcome to the Beautiful Business podcast from The Wow Company. If you're growing a UK business with a team of 8 to 80 people, you're in the right place. Every fortnight, we share honest conversations with brilliant business minds, exploring the realities of leadership, the challenges that come with growth, and the practical ideas that make a real difference. From purpose to profit, people to process, this is your space for fresh thinking and down-to-earth inspiration.
Hello, and welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Walcott, and today I'm excited to be joined by Kate Waterfall Hill, executive coach, author of the book How to Lead, podcast host, and TikTok phenomenon, Linda the Bad Manager. What you might not know about Kate is she's also coach to our MD at WOW. Lovingly, fondly, we refer to Kate as Coach Kate within WOW. So I'll try not to do that today. But anyway, Coach Kate, welcome to the podcast.
That's very kind of you to welcome me. Thank you very much. And I don't mind at all being called Coach Kate. Reminds me of being a cast member on Ted Lasso.
I know you listen to the podcast, Kate. You'll know that the first question we ask all of our guests is tell us one thing about you that our guests didn't already know.
Typical style. I've had to think about this and don't want to just tell you the answer. I'm going to make you guess. So I'm going to tell you two truths and a lie.
No,
you've got to guess which one. So my two truths and a lie are, and I don't know which order they're going to come out of my mouth in, are I have a motorbike license, I have 300,000 followers on social media platforms, and I have 3 kids, and they're all in the LGBTQ plus A, whatever the other initials are, community. Which one's the lie? Yeah, that's it.
I think you have a motorcycle license. I know you have a lot of followers. And I wonder if maybe you have 2 or 4 children, not 3.
Absolutely. Bang on. Yeah. You got it right. First guess. Yeah. Motorbike license I've had for ages and don't use. And 300,000 followers is right. And yes, I have 2 kids and I've got a non-binary and a lesbian. There you go. And I'm very proud of them both for being themselves.
Great. And are they still at home? Or?
I've got a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old. So the 22-year-old lives in Oxford and the 20-year-old is in their 3rd year at uni at Nottingham.
Thank you for sharing. I'm glad that I stumbled on the right answer. So how did you come from being Kate Waterfall Hill? You were managing director of an agency to this social media sensation, Linda the Bad Manager.
I can't help laughing when you say that because it does sound funny. It's totally stumbled across it. As I said, I've got young adult kids and my eldest was quite prolific on TikTok about 3 or 4 years ago, doing lots of book reviews because they're mad on high fantasy and other sort of genres of book, and they're getting paid by publishers to do book reviews and on Book Talk as they call it. And I featured in one of the TikToks and it went bonkers. I think we had 1 million views on it just by chance. It was a trending type of video. And I thought, well, it's quite good fun, And I thought nobody I know is going to be on TikTok. Nobody sensible, nobody professional. It's all going to be young people. And so what does it matter? I'll just do it for a bit of fun. So I did that first video of Linda the Bad Manager in January 2023. So not that long ago, actually. And it just took off. That first video went a bit bonkers. And within the first week, I had 2 proper grown-up professional people asked me if I'd coach them. I thought, oh gosh, actually this is going to be a marketing thing rather than just for fun. Because as you alluded to, I was a marketing agency MD, so I've got that sort of creative content creation type side to me. And so this outlet of being able to do content is satisfies that creative bit of me and also generates loads of revenue. I've actually tripled my revenue since doing Linda.
No way. So because you're being paid to do it, or because of the clients you've attracted?
Because of the business. it's usually one of two things. Either they watch the video, laugh, cringe, and then nod in recognition. Sometimes it's because they've seen a Linda, they've they've worked with one or they work with one, but more often because they've been a Linda themselves and
They recognise some of the
recognise it themselves.
traits.
Yeah, and also I think they recognise that because I'm sort of gently, kindly mocking it. They know that I've seen it and I know what I'm talking about, and I've either been there myself. Some of the videos are me of old, and some of them are people who I've seen. But I think people recognize that actually this might be useful because this person's walked in my shoes, as in I've been a leader myself. But also it's not going to be hard work. It's not going to be dull. It's not going to be boring. It's going to be fun and enlightening and engaging, hopefully, because I've got that sense of humor. So those are the two elements that seem to resonate.
As you look back, what have been the pivotal points in your career that have ended up where you are now?
Well, the thing, lots of things happened whilst I was at the agency, which was, although I was in the same job for 15 years, actually it was totally different in those 15 years, as as things happen and evolve in agency life, don't they, all the time. So we bought small agencies. That's one thing that we did quite early on in my career. When I started, we were 12 people, and by the time I left, we were 60. And I'm going to guess we were about the 20-person size, and then we were buying 3-person agencies or 5-person agencies, things like that, and assimilating them in. So that was quite interesting. And we got bought by this London-based company that had an American arm, and we were merged into the American arm. So I was off in New York and Florida and Minneapolis and what have you, going to meetings and stuff. So that was quite interesting. From being in a 15-person agency based in Guildford, and then at that stage, we did an MBO because the being part of this bigger company hadn't worked. And so we went back to the original investors and got them to invest in us again to help us do an MBO. And that was the first time they'd invested in the same people twice.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was quite fun. So then when I left, I sold my shares and I got a contract with the business. So I carried on working for the business as a contractor for a year. So I had my first contract when I left to start at Waterfall Hill Consulting, and that was in 2007. So I've been on my own since 2007.
Quite a journey. And what was it that led you into coaching?
I went on a course with a coach, effectively, and she said, it was a really good question, by the way, and I urge you to have a think about it after we finish this podcast, is what do you enjoy doing most? And how are you going to do more of it? So to a 2-part question. And I was like, how would I enjoy doing most? Because I was feeling a little bit disenchanted. I've been doing it for a long time, getting a bit sort of, what's my next thing? And I said, well, I really love coaching people. I love nurturing talent. I love turning or helping managers turn the person who's got their foot halfway out the door into the star performer. And that is, I find, really, really interesting, really, using business psychology and leadership techniques to just bring out the best in other people. And I find that just really exciting. That's my favorite thing. And she said, well, how are you going to do more of that? And I thought, well, I suppose tell people that's what I do, and maybe train as a coach and so have a qualification. Actually, to be honest, I've got 2 coaching qualifications. Nobody's ever asked me. Nobody cares. I had a website which was all about business improvement and strategy, and do you need somebody to be your right hand person? And then I thought, well, I could just change it because my current clients don't care what my website says. They don't look at my website. I'll just change it to say I'm a coach. So I changed it to say I'm a coach. And the idea was that I was going to, my business plan was that I had all my revenue from consulting, and I was going to gradually increase my coaching business to go like that. But actually, I ended up keeping the consultancy business and growing this business and just working harder and harder and longer and longer.
So a couple of things there to come back to. One was, you said you really love turning around those people with one foot out the door and turning them into star performers. There's a idea that you could actually invest the time in the star performers because they're the ones that are engaged and really support them. I suppose as a parent, the analogy is, when your kids, like the good, well-behaved kid in class, they don't always get the attention. It's the naughty kids. Is it not a waste of time focusing on people that have already got one foot out the door?
Well, the analogy works really well with my answer, actually, in that if you ignore the naughty ones and just invest in your your bright kids, then the naughty ones end up disrupting the class. They end up either leading the other ones astray, or just making lots of noise and making it difficult for everyone to concentrate. So in a work environment, if you don't do something about your underperformers, it irritates the star performers, because the star performers are like, well, hold on a second, they're paid the same as me, and yet they don't produce the same results. They don't work as hard. They're not putting in the effort. Why aren't you addressing this? So I think it needs to be addressed in a way. I talk a lot about balancing empathy and authority on my podcast and in the book, and it's really about being empathetic enough to care about the people, because we are all individuals, we are all human beings, and that human connection is really important. So caring enough about them, but also being able to say, and I need you to deliver this. But it's about saying, I believe in you, and I'm going to support you enough to get to do that. But I don't want to get in your way. I want to empower you, give you autonomy, but at the same time, I need you to deliver it by this time within this budget. So being really clear on the responsibility, accountability, and ownership of jobs is a leader's job. If you don't concentrate on some effort on managing and leading those underperformers, then you're not getting the best out of them. And actually, eventually, you might end up getting so fed up with them that you ask them to leave, and that takes a load of effort, doesn't it? We all know how hideous that is, and sometimes a load of money. Sometimes it comes back to bite you, because they take you to tribunal for unfair dismissal if you don't do it right. So there are lots of traps to fall into with underperformers. And then you've got to recruit somebody else, and you've got the cost of that recruitment and the cost of training and induction and getting them up to speed. And actually, sometimes it's better the devil you know. And actually, a lot of the time, I dare say, it's the leader that needs to look in the mirror and say, have I actually set this person up for success? Have I genuinely given them a good induction? Did we genuinely train them properly? Have they got the right resources? Do they have have we recruited the right person for the right role? Because that's on you as a leader. And do they understand what I'm trying to get them to do? Have I explained in my expectations really clearly? Are they motivated to do that? I remember speaking to one of my CEOs who said, I'm really frustrated with my sales team. They're not using the CRM properly. I've invested loads of money in Salesforce, I think it was, and they're just not updating it. They're not doing it. And I said, what? How are they incentivized? And he said, well, they get a low salary and really high commission when they close a deal. I said, okay, so do they get anything for doing admin? So maybe their eye is on closing the deal. They're doing what you're telling them to do by the incentive program. And if you're not giving them some recognition, or at least some incentive to get or actually a connection between, if you do the CRM, you're more likely to close a deal tomorrow. And if they don't see the connection between that, what they think is a boring admin task, if they don't see the connection between that and what's going to give them extra commission, then, I can see why they might not be incentivized to do it. So, is the reward plan such that it motivates the behavior you want? Have you actually called it out? I mean, that first Linda video I did was actually, I hate to say it, but it was a coaching client of mine who'd said this when I was coaching her. And I said to her, what's on your mind today? And she said, I've got this member of staff who's really winding me up, keeps on coming in late. And I said, oh, okay, well, she just strolls in 9:20. Just, and I said, what time is she supposed to start? 9:00. I said, okay. I said, what happens? Meaning, in my mind, I was thinking, what happens as in, what do you do about it? And she said, no, nothing. She just sits down and gets on with her work. And I said, okay, so do you say anything? And she said, oh, no, that'd be awkward. And the next time I saw her, I said, how did it go? And she said, oh, yeah, we had a conversation. I sort of said, oh, I noticed, this is my thing. I noticed on Wednesday you came in at 9:20. Can we talk about that? Because your start time is 9. And it was, I can't remember which one it was. It was either she didn't realize her start time was 9. She thought it was 9:30. I think it might have been that. Or it was, her car had broken down and she was having to get the bus, and it was either 9:20 or 8:20, and she decided on 9:20. Hadn't bothered to have the conversation. So that first video I did of Linda is her saying exactly that, oh no, I hadn't said anything. No, I just quietly raged behind her back.
That point about leaders having to look in the mirror, when you take on a new coaching client, what's your process? What are the initial questions? What are you looking for when you start that engagement?
The main things are that people want to feel in control, but without being controlling. They want to be taken seriously and respected as a leader. So sometimes it's if they're in an organization where they don't feel their voice is being heard at board level, say. They want to, navigate change. They want to be able to give feedback and rise up underperformers and motivate star players. And I can't remember the fifth one. And the sixth one is to enjoy being a leader again. I send them this questionnaire, and it's an online form they fill in, and it really focuses the mind on what they'd like to achieve, what impact it would have on them, what impact it would have on their team, their organization. It sort of gets under the skin of their motivation and drive to want to change, I suppose, because it's quite difficult to coach somebody who doesn't want to change.
How do you uncover that? How do you uncover someone who is either hard to coach, impossible to coach, thinks it's everyone else's fault, not theirs?
The two bits that my clients always have in common is they've got a sense of humor usually, and they've got enough self-awareness to know there's a gap between where they are now or where they'd like to be, and they want some support to close that gap and have some really tangible next steps. And I think that's the other thing why I'm different from a lot of coaches is because I've been an agency person as well, particularly where, in agency life, you're indoctrinated into giving good client service and making sure the client gets results and wanting to make sure you get the retainer renewed, or the contract renewed every year, is that I am very, very particular about giving people results. So that's why I dig quite deeply into what they want to get out of it, and then we refer back to that. Are you getting what you want out of the program? And giving them tangible things that they can do. So it's not just coaching isn't just a nice chat. You've had coaching, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
So what it's it's not just a nice chat. It's actually a guided conversation to help you uncover the any obstacles or what's going on for you under the surface, and then get you some solutions. And I'm very focused on that bit. And I send an email at the end of every session to my clients, which not lots of coaches believe, and I totally get this thought process that the client should be writing their own notes and taking responsibility for that, and I do get that, but because of my agency background, I'm used to writing contact report, and it's not everything we said, it's not transcript, but it's what your topic was, what your desired outcome was, and what your probably 3 to 6 next steps are going to be. I think the power of coaching is in listening, reflecting back, and asking really pertinent, well-timed, thought-provoking questions that evoke the some realization in the other person. But quite often I will move into mentorship mode with the client's approval, so with their agreement, and offer actual advice, because that's coaching is non-advisory, whereas mentorship is advice. And because I've got so many tools and techniques and checklists and TED Talks and podcasts I can signpost to people, that's often quite useful. But I do get some clients who say, Kate, what shall I do next? And I try to resist that and say, look, let's talk about what you want to do. Let's talk about what feels comfortable to you. What have you tried? What would you do if there was no fear? What would you do if there's no cost implication? Those sorts of things, and what's stopping you doing that? But the real aha moments in coaching are the ones where people come to the realization themselves.
Having been through coaching, had that moment where the coach asks you a question, and basically everything in your head just explodes, and the coach just sits there and nods, and they know that they've delivered the killer question, and they're watching all the drama go off inside your head. And so do you have like a couple of like killer questions that you...
I can't say I do have any sort of routinely, because everyone's different and every situation's different. It sort of depends on the thing. It's so sometimes I will have said a question to somebody and it'll be like you can see them go, and some people will say, "Oh my God, why didn't I think? Oh yes, of course." And then I might try that same question with somebody else the next day and it doesn't land because it's not what they needed at that particular moment. So that there's not a one size fits all. I mean, quite a good question, and I encourage other people to use this with their teams. Is what I just said. What would you do if there was no fear? That's quite often a good question, because sometimes it holds people back from saying what they want to say to their spouse, their team member, their peer, their stakeholder, their client, even. And when I say, okay, imagine literally nothing bad is going to happen. I can promise you nothing bad's going to happen. What would you say? Well, I'd say I was really upset by the way you spoke to me in that meeting, and the way that you talked over the top of me and stole my idea really undermined me, and I felt useless and undervalued, and I'd really like you not to do that again. And I say, okay, so what are you going to say? Well, just that, actually,
Yeah.
and then what would happen if you did say that? What's the worst that could happen?
This time of year, lots of people are looking at their the dreaded annual performance reviews, and specifically annual performance reviews and thinking about the year, dragging people in, sitting people down for these annual performance reviews. From your perspective, what do you see goes well? And then I'd like to get into like what should we do? How could we make this a really great process?
I feel like you led the witness a little tiny bit there, Paul, by saying by saying annual with such venom.
Spat it out.
Annual performance reviews. So if you leave your feedback for a once a year official meeting, that's probably not going to go well, particularly if the misdemeanor or whatever, the underperformance, whatever you want to correct, it was 9 months ago. It's way too late. So yeah, what you're alluding to there is a genuine not only passion of mine, but also it's the research shows us that doing annual performance reviews alone is not enough. It needs to be literally daily in every conversation. You're giving people feedback in terms of motivation and understanding of what you liked and what you didn't like in every single thing. And it's not just saying, hey, good job. That's not, I mean, it's nice, but it's not good enough. People need to know exactly what you mean by good job, which bit of it was good and why was it good. And then they know to emulate that particular bit again. And also it gives people a really good feeling that you are really paying attention and what they do matters. So if all you do is say good job, once in a while by email, and then tell somebody off, in front of everyone else, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for continual, guided feedback that actually is a gift. And I often use this analogy because I stumbled across it a few months ago, and I still love it. If you were going out for lunch with your mate, and he was or she was going on a date or going for an interview after your lunch, and as you got up, you realised that they had spinach on their teeth. What would you say to your friend? Would you say anything, or would you just leave it, or would you, kindly say, "Oh, just so you know, you've got some spinach on your teeth"? Well, I'm hoping that you'd say, "Yeah, you've got some spinach on your teeth," and rescue that person from, turning up, not looking their best. And the same is true at work. If we let people do stuff that's not quite right again and again and again, or if we're telling them that they're not doing it right, but they're still doing it wrong again and again and again, perhaps it's, you need to change the input. If you're expecting the output to be different by saying the same thing again and again, I've told her 10 times, blah, blah, blah. Well, perhaps your message isn't landing. Perhaps she's not understanding what you're saying. Perhaps, there needs to be a different conversation about that. I've talked to you a couple of times about the quality of this report, and it's still not quite meeting my expectations. Can we have a talk about that? What's difficult for you? What do you need from me? What's holding you up with not getting it quite right?
What are the things that gets in the way of feedback, like strong feedback culture?
Often time. So often people say to me, I haven't got time to do that, because if I do that, then I'm sort of interrupting the workflow, particularly in agencies where you're in the middle of a campaign, for instance, and you don't want to derail your creatives in the middle of that, because they're, you want them on track. So, so often I hear from people that say, oh, I don't want to be the bad person. I don't want to be the upset the other person. And often people will say to me, oh, I'm just a bit of a people pleaser. So I don't like to give people bad feedback, bad criticism, and I urge them to move away from thinking of it as criticism or bad feedback or anything negative, and reframe it to say, I'm helping this person do this better, or I'm helping revise the process to do it better, or actually I'm helping to understand why my brief wasn't good enough, because again, it might come back to the leader.
What was it that I'd not done?
Exactly. Yeah. Did I explain it well enough? And did I motivate the other person to get the job done to my standards? Or did I hover too much? Or did I not give them enough discretion in how to do it? So, some people shy away from it. They're worried that it's going to cause upset or an argument or defensiveness or a breakdown in the relationship. But actually, if you could view it as a gift, feedback is a gift, and being clear is kind, as Brené Brown says this in lots of her books. Being clear is kind, and being unclear is unkind, actually. And particularly if you're being unclear and then unkind, either to their face or worse still, in a way, behind their back, saying, oh, he or she's useless. We probably need to get rid of them. Well, have you actually said anything? And often it's less about criticizing the individual. If you take it away from shaming the person or judging the person or making the person feel bad, and actually say, hey, I think we need to look at the process here. We need to look at how we do this. It's the output isn't getting isn't getting the results that we want. So what do we need to change as a team, or as a pair, if you're a manager talking to a team member. So yeah, a lot of it is about moving away from shaming the person to naming the issue.
But also, there's kind of that thing of like just feedback not being a habit as well, right? That actually, if you're in the habit of giving feedback, you'd end up giving at least twice as much positive feedback. And I'm not talking about like before you said about the good job, like the tap on the head bit. Actually, I noticed this and this was great. Give people something they can do more of.
Yeah, absolutely. And even think when things aren't going terribly well, is to say, I know it's been really tough recently. We've been really, under-resourced, and it's been really stressful, and the client's been a bit difficult. But I'm really, really grateful for you, carrying on your patience, your resilience, your tenacity, and it's really helpful, and I really appreciate it. We'll get there in the end together. What do you need from me? And how can I support you without getting in your way? Is a great question to ask team members.
I love that. How can I support you without getting in the way? So if we're in agreement that the annual performance review is a terrible idea, it should be bin, and we had a fresh sheet of paper, fresh start, and we were going to think about, so majority of our listeners are people running 8 to 80 staff businesses. How would we go about managing performance in those organizations?
I'd say it all comes from the top. So people like yourself, managing your next layer down and role modeling that really well, and doing the conversations often, and having one-to-ones which aren't just about the task or the objectives or the meeting the strategic goals of the business, but are actually about the person. And it might well be that you have one-to-ones that have two parts, and you have have very clear agenda. One is about how are we getting on with the assignment, as it were, and how are you separately, or it might be that you need to have two separate meetings, so it depends on the person. I encourage my clients to ask their teams, because some people, particularly new recruits or people who like a lot of feedback, will say, oh yeah, can I have a half an hour one-to-one with you every week? Absolutely fine. That's a really great touch point to have, to sort of take their temperature, as it were, and to to keep them rolling on and knowing that they're going in the right direction. And other people will say, oh no, an hour once a month is fine with me, or even once a quarter. But I'd encourage it once a month, really. That's probably better. And then really simply to have a really simple little agenda that you let the person know before you do the first one. We're going to have a different style of check-in, and I'd call it a check-in, because it's not an appraisal or a performance review. You want to make it sure it's clear that it's light touch and it's about them. Going to have a little check-in. These are the things I want to talk about. I'd love you to be prepared, when you come to the conversation. And it's successes, what's gone well, what have you achieved, what are you pleased with, what's been challenging, and what have you learned, what ideas have you got, questions do you have, what's next for you. And that might not be something that they have every single time you meet, but it might be a feeling like I'm really on top of what I'm doing these days, and I'd love this challenge that I've seen that you've got on your plate that I'd like to help you with, or can I present to the board meeting next week or whatever. And then the last one is that one, what help do they need, or what help could they offer? And having help on the agenda is a really nice thing to make it really clear that there's no stigma asking for help. So if it's on there every time, then it's really clear. And this can be true for team meetings as well. You can do this individually and in teams. And the help is, here's something I've worked out how to do, and it's really, really brilliant. Let me share it with the rest of you. So offering help to others, or I've got some extra resource next week, and I've got some time in my team to help somebody else. And likewise, to be able to put your hand up and say, I really need some help. I don't know how to do this, or I need some extra resources and support next week. So successes, challenges and learnings, ideas and questions, your next challenge, career, opportunity, and help with the 5.
Just to recap, playbook is number 1, lead from the top, model behavior, set the example. Number 2, make sure that we have these monthly check-ins, at least monthly check-ins. Like what else do we need to put in place?
I would say as well the leaders of the organisation need to make sure that when they give somebody responsibility for other people, that they support them. So often I see accidental managers, people who have been really good at being an individual contributor, brilliant at what they do, and then they're, oh yeah, you're a fantastic designer. Let's make you lead designer, and you can manage these 3 other designers. But we're not going to take any work off you, and we're not going to give you any support or training. And then they wonder why those people break. So those are the 2 things I would say if you're in a management team, is when you're looking at promoting somebody, make sure you take some of their work off them so that they don't have the same portfolio that they had before and people to manage. Take 20% off them maybe, so they can have a day a week over the week. Concentrating on spending time with their team and thinking more strategically and making good decisions and planning well, but mostly spending time with their team. And also give them some training, give them some either coaching or a group coaching program or an online leadership development type program, which obviously I've got lots of.
What else can we do throughout an organisation to promote that, and what structures can we put in place?
I would also say that do it the other way around, is to invite feedback on yourself. And I don't necessarily mean in surveys are great and what's the system you use? You've got a great system, haven't you?
So
Office Vibe, is it called?
Yeah, we use a system called Office Vibe, where a pulse survey goes out once a fortnight to everyone, and there's just a handful of questions, and it just helps us stay on the pulse. But it also gives an anonymous feedback channel that if anyone does want to give feedback anonymously or raise questions, they can.
Yeah, brilliant. Which is really good, and I really love that as a sort of ongoing business as usual type thing that you do. But I also would encourage all leaders, wherever they are in the organisation, to have conversations which say, what would you like me to stop doing, start doing, continue doing? What bits of the way we work together work for you, and what could we do differently? And have those open conversations and take the feedback without defensiveness, without answering, yeah, but I do that because of this. Just really genuinely listen and reflect on it and think what can I do differently? Because if you treat all information, whether it's would have traditionally been perceived as criticism or good feedback, I would take all information as rich sources of information for positive change. Because if you don't know what you're doing, that's maybe slightly irritating or stifling somebody else's growth or whatever. If they don't tell you that, then you don't know. You'll carry on doing it. But actually, to have somebody say, do you know what was really great in that meeting when you let me lead that bit of it? I love doing that. Can I do more of that? If you're not open to hearing that, then you won't know, and you'll stumble through thinking you're doing the right thing. And bearing in mind everyone's different. One of the things I offer on my Leadership Accelerator program is disc profiling. I think do you do any?
So we do a similar
profiling?
profile. We do the insights, the colours, where
Insights, yeah.
you have
Yeah.
end up with a
Yeah.
different mix of colours to explain your communication styles.
And part of the disc is for me anyway, slightly more practical, and that you get a portal with loads and loads of information on how you can make messages land well, ease tension, get buy-in from different types of people. It's really, really good, and it has little lots of subtleties and nuances to it, which I really like. But it's not too complex to understand either. For me, it's the right measure. But one of the things I say to my members is, if all you get from DISC is an understanding that we're all different, that's a win for me. Just work. Just recognize that some people are fast. Fast paced. Quick decision makers. Want the top line, want to get on with things. Some people are more steady, more meticulous, more methodical, and you need both. Some people love other people, love the energy they get from being with others, and other people are more task driven and more task focused and less, want to spend less time on the people side of things. And again, both styles are important in teams. So sometimes people go, oh, that's why my boss, just wants me to cut to the chase when it comes to delivering a recommendation. Oh, and that's why my team member needs me to go through the why we're here, what the thought process was, and what's going to happen next, and the step-by-step instructions, because they are different from me, and that's okay. It's okay to be different. So yeah, it's really interesting. I love this line of work.
So if anyone listening hasn't done Discord Insights, a couple of exercises that you can do. One is have a chat to friend, partner, colleague, and ask them, if we were going to go on holiday together, how would you go about organizing the holiday? And then what you get is you start to understand that people just have fundamentally different ways of doing this. Another exercise we run a couple of times at WOW is to, on a team call, get everyone to take a blank sheet of paper and tell me how you build a snowman. And what you end up, I talked about this on a different episode actually, but what you end up with is you see different, some people like more detail, some people are like straight to the point, some people are more visual. So I think definitely understanding how people communicate and this profiling insights. What else do we need to do to have this kind of like elite performance management within our organizations?
I recommend having some sort of feedback framework, particularly if you're picking somebody up on something that's not gone quite right. So rather than just sort of stumbling into, you're always this, or you're never that, or that was rubbish. Actually, to go through a framework, and what I've done is I've taken all the traditional frameworks. There's SBI, situation, behavior, impact, COIN, CEDO. I've taken all of the best ones, and taken the best bits of them all and put them into my own one, which is called SOEROC, SOEROC, and SOEROC stands for situation, observation, even better, results, options, check-in, and I'll take you through them because you're not going to remember all that. So a situation is literally, when this thing happened. So what I was saying before about the person who's always late is to rather than saying you're always late, is to say on Tuesday, literally on Tuesday this happened. So the situation, be very specific, don't be too vague. Then the observation, what I noticed. So on Tuesday I noticed you came late to the client meeting. And then even better, so point out what would have been even better. So rather than being really critical of them, it would have been even better if you'd been on time or 10 minutes early. Or actually even better than that would be to get the other person to volunteer it themselves. So that being late's not a great example. Let me think of another one. I know presenting data in a meeting. So at the meeting on Thursday, I noticed you did a great presentation. The data slides, were less than clear. And then, if the other person then says, I know, I did those in a rush, and that my computer crashed the night before, or whatever, it gives you the reason. Then you can be a bit more sympathetic than somebody who sort of says, yeah, what's wrong with it? So it gives you the measure of whether the person's recognised the deficiency or not. And so that's quite helpful, just to give, to pause rather than pile in with the criticism, to see, has this person understood? Have they got it themselves? And actually, are they already of a mind to work out how to correct it? Because if they are, it's a different conversation from somebody who's very defensive or not even aware of the issue, sort of blissfully unaware. So situation, observation, even better. And at the meeting on Thursday, I noticed that the presentation went well, but you maybe slightly lost the audience when you got to the data slides. What would have been even better? Okay. And then results. What happened because the data wasn't clear? Oh yes, the audience got lost. We didn't land the message terribly well. We didn't get the approval that we wanted. So what are the options for next time? That's the next one. That's O. Get the other person to try and volunteer what they're going to do differently. I'm going to go and speak to IT earlier on in the day to get the data that we needed. And then check-in. The check-in is making sure you have an arrangement to have a catch-up about it afterwards. So rather than just leaving somebody with the change in behavior that you want to see, actually have a conversation about it again and book it in and make sure you do it. This is where I see so many people fall down, particularly when they're delegating, as they forget to do a check-in or they forget to book a check-in. So they'll delegate a job and then say, here's what you need to do. Everyone got it? Yep. Everyone clear? Fantastic. Got any questions? No. Good. And if you have any questions, then come and see me. And of course, people don't, because they think you're busy and they're embarrassed. They're asking a question that maybe they should have known the answer to. Maybe they wandered off while you were talking, thinking about what they were going to have for supper tonight. And, they're embarrassed to come and find you. So they don't. And then they don't do the job. And then you get to the deadline You haven't done a check-in, so you get to the Friday when they expected the presentation to be done, and they haven't started it yet. So frustrating. So actually having some check-ins along the way, if you've given somebody maybe 3 weeks to get something done, maybe have a check-in at week 1 and week 2, rather than leaving it to week 3 and then find they haven't started it yet.
I
And
think
give
that's
them
a
an
really good point.
opportunity to ask you questions. And when you're delegating, I encourage people to, rather than say, anybody got any questions, is to first to say, what are your questions? So make it, it's an acceptable. And the other thing is to ask them questions, to say, okay, what's your first next step going to be? What are you worried about here? What might get in the way? What are you excited about? What resources do you need? What support do you need from me without getting in your way? So actually asking really good coaching questions when you delegate is the key to getting somebody to really, to know whether or not the person's got the assignment. My favorite one of those is, what's your first next step? Because, if people can't tell you what their first next step's going to be, then they probably haven't understood what you've said, or they need time to process it, and that's okay. They might say, I don't know what my first next step going to be. I'm going to wait and think about it, but can I come back to you tomorrow to talk about what my first next step's going to be? And you can make sure that that's okay.
And that can almost be your check-in as well, can't it? That, okay, well, we'll make sure this happens tomorrow. I think that's really interesting, because what you're advocating is like a coaching approach to leadership. Whereas I'm sure you have many clients and many people listening to this that they feel the burden to fix that thing. If someone's late, well, I need to fix them. I need to tell them what to do. But actually, with your SOEROC framework, which is brilliant, I hope everyone's written it down, SOEROC. What we've got with that framework is actually like a way that we can coach that stuff and give the individuals the empowerment and the ownership themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing I so often see, is that leaders think that they need to have all the answers, possibly because that's what's got them to where they are. Either they've started their own business. Yeah, they've either started their own business and, that's their idea, and they set the agenda and the culture and everything else, and they think they've got to carry on doing that, or they've been promoted because they've been a great individual contributor. They work hard, they do stuff outside their job description. They're very task focused and progress orientated, and often take things on outside. Are up for a challenge. But what got you there won't you just literally can't do more and more hours. You've got to have a different technique. Jack Welch from General Electric famously said, before you're a leader, success is about growing yourself, but when you become a leader, success is about growing others. And it is about, empowering other people to make decisions, to solve problems for themselves. And that's often what I help on leaders unlock, is that they don't have to do it all themselves.
What are the questions that leaders could ask themselves to help them make the next 12 months their best 12 months ever?
For me, it all starts with reflection. First of all, is to think about what happened in the previous year, and what were the highlights, what were the things that you maybe wish you'd done differently, and what do you need to do differently, and what support do you need to get to make that different. What challenging conversation did you avoid that you maybe need to have going forwards? What do you want to see at the end of next year? So having time to sit and reflect and just think about what, and it's actually something I'm doing now, and I've got a reflect and plan podcast coming out in the first week of January, and with that comes a workbook, because that it's there's quite a lot of layers to it. So I'm going to give people a free workbook that they can download, and it's really about spending time thinking, what did I do well? A bit like that stop, start, continue. What do I want to stop? What do I want to start? And what do I want to continue in myself? In two ways. One is in your leadership. What sort of impact do you want to have as a leader? What sort of leader do you want to be? Are you do you know your values? Are you living your values? Are you leaning on them? Are you showing up authentically but consistently? So you're able to give a considered response rather than an emotional reaction to things that come your way. So really having a think about you and who you are as a leader, but also what your team needs, what your organization needs, what growth looks like. I would say take those two things almost separately, and maybe do, obviously I would say do the reflect and plan on your leadership impact with a great leadership coach. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I'd also say do the team and the organization's goals for 2026 with your team. You don't need to do this on your own. Actually having a session where you ask those really good questions about what do we do well, what do we miss, what would we like to do differently, and what do we want the end of next year to look like with your team. And it can actually be a really good team building and trust building exercise as well as doing the planning.
Brilliant. Okay, so reflection, and then the reflections. Then I guess what you're saying is from those reflections, we get the information, the data we need to then do the planning for the year ahead. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Get the inspiration for that, and it's something I'm doing right now. I'm looking at how I'm going to. I was talking to you before we started recording about revenue streams, and I'm looking at my own revenue streams. I've got some passive income revenue streams in terms of my book and digital products, and then I've got my sort of quite high touch group program, and then I've got my one-to-one coaching program. And I'm thinking, well, how am I going to? I'm in my mid. Am I in my mid 50s? I think I'm going to say I'm in my mid 50s. I'm not quite in my late 50s. Yeah, yeah. So I'm thinking, what am I going to? Am I going to be able to keep up this pace of work for the next 10 years? Probably not. So I'm working a lot. And so what does my business model need to look like? So I'm sort of working backwards from my 5-year plan. And thinking, okay, what do I need to do in 3 years? What do I need to do in 2? What do I need to do in 1? What do I need to do in the next 6 months to make that more likely to happen? So so it's certainly, a lot of food for thought, but it does take some time, and it needs some discipline to block out the time. I think that's as well why so many leaders like to have a coach. I'm not selling my own services. I'm talking about coaching as a discipline, because if I said to you, do you have coaching at the moment, Paul?
Yes. Yeah.
But I was going to say, if you didn't have coaching and I said to you, I can more or less guarantee that your life will be better if you put an hour aside every month to sit and reflect and plan, basically, the discipline I just talked about, for an hour. You'd go, oh yeah, that's a good idea, Kate, I'll do that. And then you put it in your diary, and before you know where you are, it would get taken
The
by
thing that
something
would
else.
get overrun. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you book it with an accountability partner, it doesn't have to be a coach, but just somebody else. You're more like, it's a bit like going to the gym, isn't it? If you book or going for a run, you're more likely to do it with a mate.
100%, or a personal trainer to continue the coaching idea. You're not going to not turn up for it. Whereas that might be the thing that gets bumped. Or I completely get that. So one thing you said before was you've got this 5-year time horizon. If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do over the next 5 years?
Oh gosh, that is an interesting one. Because my business model is very much based on me, and particularly with my content creation hat on, that people are seeing me on social media and then wanting me. It's quite tricky for me to scale. And so I'm not imagining that I'm going to be able to sell my business as an entity, because it's going to be tied to being me. And I imagine lots of your clients are a bit like that as well. Your 8 to 80 size of companies. I imagine a lot of them are hinged on the founder. So my current plan is to have some associate coaches. I've already got a few that I work with who come and do guest speaker appearances at my Leadership Accelerator group. And I'm looking at changing it just slightly from an accelerator group, which is group coaching and online course, to being a mastermind. So I'm hoping that it's going to be a bit more that I then will produce more masterclasses. I've got one which is feedback masterclass, which I talked to you about, which is it's a on-demand video and workbook, and I'm going to produce more of those. So I'm going to have more passive income stream. That's the idea, is that it has less, it needs me less. And then one of my business coach, she's also got the same sort of business plan as me, but we both do group programs. She has a mastermind and she does some one-to-ones. And she said her dream, and I'm sort of emulating it, following in her footsteps, is to get somebody else to come and be the workhorse so she can be the show pony. I actually worked out that I have suffer from a condition called precrastination.
Okay. And what does
Heard
that
of
mean?
that?
No.
Well, you know what procrastination means.
Yeah.
You tend to put things off to another day because it feels you just don't have the energy or whatever. I'm the complete opposite. I literally, as soon as I think of it, I do it, which is great for taking action. I'm on the disc profiling. There's a circle, and the further you are at the edge of the circle, the more extreme you are of those attributes. And I am literally at the extreme. I'm right on the extremity of the disc profiling on ID. So I'm fast action taker. Combination of people and tasks is my thing. And what I tend to do, I literally have an idea and I action it straight away, which is great. But it sometimes means that it's less than perfect, because I believe in imperfect action is better than perfect inaction.
Yeah. Something is
And I
better
know,
than nothing. Yeah.
yeah, because then, with the something, you can refine it. You get that rich feedback I talked about. Actually, that's not working. Let's tweak it. Let's do something differently. But if you don't do it, you don't know. You just suppose that this is gonna succeed or it's gonna fail. I know because I've tried it. And I put it out there and had a go. And there's very little I've done that I've thought I wish I hadn't done that. Nearly everything. I can't think of anything that I've done particularly that I wish I hadn't done. I don't really have any regrets. So I suppose that attitude, that mindset that I naturally have, I haven't sort of nurtured it in any way. It's just part of my personality. Is that if I have a go and something doesn't work, that tells me that doesn't work. That's all it does. It
Cool.
just tells me that doesn't work, and I need to try something else.
That's quite an inspiring mindset and thought to leave us all with together. Kate, this has been absolutely packed full of insight. I could sit here and talk to you all day. I think given our listeners so much to take away, we'll put some links back to you in the show notes so that people can see those. You've got your feedback masterclass coming up. How can people get hold of your feedback masterclass, Kate?
That's on my website, waterfallhill.co.uk. There's free resources on there, link to my podcast, the Leadership Evolution quiz, but there's also the masterclass. So it's literally just that same web address /masterclass, and you get access to the feedback masterclass there.
Perfect. And I direct anyone there. The two questions we ask all of our guests are, what does beautiful business mean to you?
Enjoying yourself, being able to have some joy in it as well. Because for me, business is a passion. I love business. I love working. I love the idea of working out how to either make money or to serve your whatever your stakeholder is. I do work with agencies and the NHS and consultancies and charities as well. So it's not all about making money, but whatever your objective is, I love that. I love that sort of that getting under the skin of things and working out how things work and how to make things successful. But beautiful business is about enjoying it, because we how many hours a year do we spend? 2,000 or something a year working, and if we're not enjoying it, what's the point?
And if you had one final, there've been loads of advice today. You have one final piece of advice for our listeners. What would you share?
I would say take a beat. So just have a think, using the idea of reflecting and planning to make sure that you're learning from what's gone before and then taking it into what's going forward. But just taking a beat as well before you respond. So somebody says something, ask you a question that you think, oh, so irritating. Why are they asking that again? Just stopping yourself for a minute and asking a question instead. That's curious. I thought we talked about that last week. What's going on for you, what's happened, and what's your thought process in that decision when you think something's a bonkers decision, to actually learn more. So taking a beat to stop and pause, to give yourself some time. Actually, that the old thing about taking time out and going for a walk in nature, really, really good for everybody, including leaders, very much so. But also taking some time regularly to set your intention, 10 minutes every day. Think about what you want to get out of the day, how you can lean on your values, how you're going to show up as a leader. And then once a month, taking a bit more time to reflect and plan. And then annually for 2026, do some proper reflecting and planning on 25 and what you want for 26.
What great advice. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us today, Kate. Been a great discussion, packed full of insight. I've loved having the opportunity to hang out with you. I've heard so much about Coach Kate, and this has been my first real opportunity to get to know you and talk. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Beautiful Business Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please remember to subscribe and leave us a review. For more advice and practical tips on what it's really like to build a beautiful business, visit our content hub at wowco.uk/hub, or check out the link in the show notes.